Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of the Book Blab. This is a monthly-ish show where we talk about bookish topics. And my name is Amy, and I'm here with my co-host, Suzanne. And we are really excited about this month's topic. So excited, in fact, that I just want to jump right into it. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, let's get going. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart and something that I'm very passionate about and have wanted to talk about with our on this show since we started it, and that is the subject of reading aloud. And today we specifically will be talking about reading aloud to our children, but of course, reading aloud can be enjoyed by anyone of any age. And for my own part, over the years, before I had children, I enjoyed reading aloud with my husband quite a bit. And I can even remember one instance where one of my best friends, she was taking a children's literature course in college. And so she had a massive amount of children's literature to read. And she was just kind of feeling like she was always by herself reading. And so she said, "Do you want to read one of these books with me?" And I said, "Sure." So she would just come over and we would read it together. And it was so much fun. But
that is fun.
I think that's something that people don't always think about. But anyway, yes. So today we'll mostly be talking about reading aloud to our kids and why reading aloud is so important, and some of our own tips and tricks for what has worked in our families. And then, of course, we'll be sharing lots of book recommendations for good family read aloud. So, Suzanne, why don't you start and just talk to us just in general terms, why reading aloud, why it's so important.
All right. Yes, and I'll just start off by saying that Amy's the expert here, for sure. She's had years and years of practice with her kids and experience, and has so many wonderful ideas and tips and tricks and books and all of that. And so I actually suggested that we do this topic just so I can have the opportunity to ask her all the questions I have. Because my children are just a little bit younger, but we had started in the past year getting into chapter book read alouds, and we've had some ups and downs. So I'm kind of excited to pick Amy's brain on this topic, get all of her recommendations. Right, and as far as generally reading aloud, I think most parents understand that good parents read aloud to their kids, right? Especially kids that are too young to read for themselves. But I think a lot of parents stop reading out loud to their kids once their kids learn to read on their own or hit the point of chapter books and are more fluent and just sort of let kids read on their own at that point. But obviously both of us believe that reading aloud should go on and on forever, and that it's well, I don't know of any like specific studies to cite or anything like that, but just from personal experience growing up with my mom reading aloud to me and with reading to my children, and like you talked about, reading with your husband, reading with other people, reading aloud is a great relationship builder.
It is. For sure.
Yeah, it is. In fact, it's like one of those core family traditions that's really bonding and also, like a shared intellectual experience or learning experience or, like all those good things about books, but bringing a social aspect to it. And so, reading aloud to your kids is just so important.
It's a shared experience just as much as like going on vacation together is a shared experience. Mm-hmm. You have those family memories then. And we have a lot of just family jokes or sayings that have come from books and that are just now a part of our family culture, And
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to mention a couple other things that I think, a couple other reasons that reading aloud together as a family is so important. And one of those is that it can really lead to important discussions that you might not be able to delve into otherwise. I mean, I'm finding that more and more as we're reading more just deeper books or books that have a little bit more depth to them, that those are leading us to talk about things that it can be hard just to bring up
right, exactly,
on your own, you know, or it can feel awkward. But if it's connected to a story, it makes it so much easier to get into, or just to see like, what are their questions about it, or what do they already understand? And then something else that has been so great for me, and this could just be because I have boys and they're a little bit more physical and wild and harder to, they don't sit very well. But when we read aloud, they want to be close to me. You know, they want to cuddle up next to me. And I honestly don't know if that would happen if we weren't reading aloud, because they're just so good. So reading aloud has really given us that opportunity to have that physical closeness that I really think is so important, even as they grow up. So,
and I just want to bring up one resource that I'm pretty sure you introduced it to me, but I've seen it in several other places too. And it's the Read Aloud Revival podcast / website / community, whatever they are. And right, and they talk about all of these reasons of why it is so important to read to your children, and all of the good benefits and whatnot. So I didn't think we could have a show about reading aloud without mentioning this podcast, just because.
For sure not. Yeah. Sarah Mackenzie, she's a huge advocate for reading aloud and building the family culture around those books, and reading well into the teen years, which is just so fantastic. So,
and she has the podcast has lots of great interviews and information and just motivation and inspiration, and plus all of their book recommendations. So anyway, check that out
and we'll definitely put a link to that in the show notes on our blogs after this.
Right. So now it's time for my questions for Amy.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, let's jump into these. So question number one for you is, when do you fit reading aloud into your family schedule? Because things are super busy. You've got kids in school, you've got kids not in school, and family life is just hectic. So homework, sports activities, all these things. When do you fit in reading aloud?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think that's probably a question that a lot of parents have, because they see the benefits of reading aloud, but they don't understand how they could possibly fit in one more thing into their schedule. So I think that's first and foremost, you just have to decide it's important, and some other things might get pushed aside in favor of it. So I think you kind of have to make that commitment. But for us, over the years, it has changed. When my kids were really small, I almost always read aloud to them at lunchtime, because they were occupied doing something else, and they were really focused then. And it's been a long time now since I've read at meal times, because now, I don't know, it doesn't work as well. So now with my older kids, I read before they go to bed. And I know that's when a lot of people do it. But I think for us, it gets to be 7:30, and that's like, it's time. We have to be ready for bed, pajamas on, teeth brushed, so that we can read aloud. So it's very much fixed to our schedule, instead of just like, oh, do we have time to read aloud tonight? Well, okay, maybe. It's not like that at all. It's like, we are doing this at this time so that we have a good half hour at least to read before they go to bed.
And do you read pretty much every day, or just weekdays?
It's pretty much every day. In fact, sometimes I'm not saying that we don't ever skip, because that does happen. And sometimes I have things going on in the evening that it just doesn't work out for us to read aloud. But sometimes, even when I know that I have something like book club or something later that night, I'll read to them earlier in the evening instead, like right after dinner, just because I'm addicted. I'm addicted to reading aloud. I hate to miss that time with my kids. So we do pretty consistently read every day. And I was also going to say, with my big kids now, lots of times if I have a huge pile of laundry that needs to be folded, I will just say to them, would you like to fold all these clothes and I'll read to you? And they will do it. So sometimes, on a Saturday or something, reading will happen in the afternoon or in the morning, just because I can get them to do some chores at the same time.
I love that.
So, but I would say just stay flexible and see what works for your family. Like, when is a good time? When will you be alert? And when will your kids be attentive? And if it's not working, try a different time and be willing to be flexible and move to a different time later on if that time isn't working anymore for you.
I like that. All right, now you have 4, soon to be 5 boys spread out over, so your oldest is what? 8, right? So how do you manage that? Like, you've got older kids, you've got younger kids, they're all on different levels, different interests.
Yeah, that's part of having a big family, is definitely like, how do we manage this when they aren't all at the same level? I will say right now, my 3 older boys, I can read to them all together, and it seems to work out fine. So the 3 oldest are 5.5, 7, and 8. And
so that's fairly close, I guess, within.
Yeah, they're pretty close in age. And then we've got Clark, who's almost 3. And so generally how we do it is I read to the older boys in the evening, and my husband reads to Clark just by himself in his room. So they can just do their picture books.
Divide and conquer. That's a good way to do it.
Exactly. So that has been how we've done it in the past too. And for a while it was Bradley, who's 3rd in line. He would kind of go back and forth. Sometimes he would read with my husband, and sometimes he decided that the read aloud that I was reading to the older 2 looked good or sounded good. So he would kind of come in and listen to that. But now he's pretty much exclusively reading with us.
In the chapter book club.
In the evening. Yeah. And I guess the other thing, as I'm choosing books that we're going to be reading, there are some that I'm probably avoiding that I know aren't going to appeal to Bradley yet, but he can handle quite a high level of writing. It's just sometimes the topics are a little bit maybe too mature for him. So that has been something we've debated, like with Harry Potter. Like, how many am I going to let him listen to before I decide it's a little bit too advanced for him? So yeah, that's a little bit of a trick, but generally I can pick books that my 8-year-old definitely enjoys and my 5-year-old loves just as much. So.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, because that's what are your tips and tricks for finding books tailored to age level, tailored to interest? What do you think about when picking books?
I mean, obviously we have like our favorite authors, and so we can always fall back on those if we need to. But then as we're branching out into new things, I mean, usually it's just something that I've heard recommended, like on the Read Aloud Revival podcast, or that I remember from my own childhood. And then we honestly just try it. And if we don't like it, then we put it aside. But I've been surprised.
Okay, well, I'm gonna say that's huge. That just knowing that it's okay to put a book down.
Oh,
if it's
for
not
sure.
working for your family.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm a finisher a lot of times. Need to finish the book, but with kids sometimes if it's not working.
Yeah, if the interest isn't there, they're just not going to enjoy it, and neither are you. So yeah, definitely just be willing to put down the books. But I have found and been very surprised that my kids, like some of the books that I was a little unsure about, like I don't know how this is going to go over, they've loved. For example, we read All of a Kind Family last fall by Sydney Taylor, and that is a book set in the early 20th century about a family with 5 daughters And so it's very far removed from our current situation, because I didn't know, are my kids going to be able to relate to a book that is about a family of all girls when we are a family of all boys? But they loved it. And so I think just be willing to try it. And if it doesn't work, then that's fine. But don't necessarily think, okay, that doesn't sound like a book for our family, or that sounds too girly or too boyish or whatever. Just be willing to try. And the other thing I would say is as you're deciding on books is choose a book that you, as the mom or the dad, will enjoy reading. Because I cannot believe how many times I hear parents talking about the books that they're reading aloud to their kids. And I just think, oh my goodness, I would seriously just gag if I had to read that. This would not be something I would be looking forward to at all. For example, I know a lot of people who start out with the Magic Treehouse books, and I am not criticizing the Magic Treehouse books at all, because they definitely have their place. But I cannot imagine reading 1 through like 97 of those to my kids. I would go crazy. So, I mean, if that's what the parent is enjoying, then that's great. But there are so many good books out there that you as a parent can enjoy just as much as your child. And you can just save the Magic Treehouse for them to build up their own fluency with reading on their own. So there's a place for everything.
That's a great tip. That is a great tip. Some books can be just for the kids, and that's fine too.
Yeah, because sometimes I can't wait to get to the book, just as much as my kids can't wait to get back to it, because we're just enjoying it so much.
That is so fun.
So, yeah.
So, yeah. What about like the day-to-day you have boys, I have boys, maybe reading to girls is different, but I just find there's a lot of like squirreliness, a lot of like kind of like they like the book, but they're not paying attention, and then all of a sudden they've missed half of the story, and I have to go back and repeat. Anyway, so yeah, what kind of tips or tricks do you have for that sort of just the general little kids not paying attention, and it's totally normal, but for sure. Yeah, what do you do?
And I'm glad you said that. It is totally normal. So if parents are getting into reading aloud and they expect it to just be like their kids sitting primly on the couch and just hanging on every word.
Hanging off every word.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen. That's just not realistic. So we definitely have rules for what is appropriate and not. For example, I don't generally let my kids sit next to each other while we're reading, because it tends to turn into a wrestling match. I mean, that is just the nature of boys. That's what I found. So they're not usually allowed to sit together, but they're allowed to sit by me. And so they can do that. But then we just have a bunch of activities that they know that they are free to do while I'm reading aloud. So like putting together a puzzle, or drawing a picture, or coloring, or they have this silly putty type stuff that they love. So they'll just like use that and, kind of mold it. Or
yeah, that's fun. Or fold laundry.
What else? What'd you say?
Folding laundry.
Folding laundry. Exactly. So just anything to keep their hands busy, so that their mind can be engaged. And I mean, there are times too when it does seem like they're kind of getting a little bit like they're not focusing. And so I'll just say like, what was going on right now? And generally, I mean, 9 times out of 10, I'm actually surprised that they were listening, and it looked like they weren't at all, but they can like repeat back verbatim what just happened. And sometimes they zoned out, and I zone out sometimes when I'm reading. So I think that's just a part of what happens sometimes. But I would say definitely let them find quiet activities that they can do, and let them do them while you read aloud. And I mean, you'll know too after a while, like what takes too much of their attention and won't let them concentrate, and what kind of enhances it a little bit more, so that they can just pay attention while they're still doing it. So
yeah, that's great. Yeah, I really like that.
But yes, I think definitely setting down some guidelines for your kids. Just like, okay, this is not appropriate while we read aloud. This is, like, give them choices so that they can actually, so that they don't feel like you're just forcing them to sit on the couch, but also
right, like being understanding that they're kids and they need to move and they need to, and that squirreliness is not, but they're not going to sit there and listen quietly for 20 or 30 minutes or however long you're reading. They've got to be, so any other tips or tricks or things that you've learned through the years of reading aloud? Anything else you want to share?
Just one other. Sorry, I've talked a lot on this episode. But
you are the expert. That's why we're doing this.
I can't help it. But a lot of times people will ask me, when can I start reading chapter books to my kids? Because they're really anxious to do it. And I understand that, because with my oldest, you know, there's just something like, you just have all these memories tied up with these books and you just cannot wait to share them with your kids. And I will say, even though now we're well into chapter books and my kids are well established with chapter books, we still read picture books. I don't know that we'll ever, you know, picture books are just fun. I just love them. So,
and picture books are for a lot of age ranges too. You know, like you can't stop reading picture books at age 4 or 5 or whatever, because some picture books are for older kids.
Oh, yeah, some picture books are so text heavy. Yeah. And so I would just say, like, don't think of chapter books as the next milestone and that then you've left behind picture books, but, you know, keep mixing those in. But so with my oldest, I think we read our first chapter book, which was the Ralph book, the one about the mouse. What's it called? The Mouse and the Motorcycle. Yep. Mouse and the Motorcycle. So that was our first read aloud, and he was 3.5 when we did it, and it worked out fine. But I mean, we could have waited. That would have been fine to wait. He definitely wasn't in a position where we had to start reading chapter books right then. So that was a very conscious decision. I thought really hard, like, what should our first book be, and when is he going to be old enough? And I kind of, you know, just paid attention to, like, can he listen to longer picture books, and how's he doing, like, with some of the just like more easy reader chapter books, and that's how I gauged it. But now that I have kids that have followed him, they really decide for themselves when they're ready to read chapter books. Like I was saying with Bradley, who's the third, for a long time, he would just, some nights he would listen to what I was reading to the older two. Some nights he'd go with my husband and they would read together. And I didn't make a big deal about it at all. I just said, oh yeah, if you want to come listen, that's fine. And so yeah, I think with your oldest, you kind of have to decide, like, oh, well, maybe we should try this. But after that, just kind of let them come in and out of the room as they want, and they'll just eventually settle down into it a little bit more.
That's great. Yeah, it's like learning to read too. There's no set age that it has to happen at, and it can be flexible. And
exactly.
Yeah, just wait till your child's ready.
Yep.
That's great. Okay. So this is the part I'm excited for. Let's just get some of your favorite read aloud books, ones that have really worked well for your family. So
okay, well, and I want to hear yours too, because I know that you have some that you've already read with your oldest, and so I'd love to hear those. But okay, I'm going to say that our two favorite series that we've ever read are both by Beverly Cleary, and they're the Ramona Quimby series and the Henry Higgins series. Those just hands down have brought us the most joy and happiness of any other series.
Okay. But I'm gonna interject right here, because we actually read, let's see, what was it? Henry Higgins and the Paper Route, I think. We should, I like, now that I'm thinking about it, we should have done them in order, but this is one that my library had on hold, so we got it. Yeah. And oh my goodness.
Did it not go over well?
It's just so funny, because we live in an inner city apartment, and my son had no idea what newspapers were, no concept of a paper route, of like riding a bike and throwing papers on a driveway. Like, all of this was so foreign to him, and I was trying to explain how neighborhoods work, and I was like, oh, my poor city children.
That's
who don't
funny.
know what suburban life is like because we live in an apartment.
That's
Anyway,
funny.
so yeah, but he actually loved the Ramona character. So we are definitely going
That
to go
is
back and start with
who
Ramona. I
my
think.
kids always loved in the Henry books too. They would
Yeah.
just laugh so hard at all the Ramona because she's younger in those ones. Well, and she's younger
So much
when the
fun.
Ramona series starts. But yeah, I would go back to the first because I think maybe he'll like that one a little bit more, and then you can kind of establish the characters a little bit better before he has his paper route. But that definitely has been something. I mean, as we read books from different eras, I have to explain a lot of things. Like they asked me, you know, what's a filling station? And like, it's a gas station. And why is someone coming out to fill up their car? Well, I mean, and I guess in some parts of the country, you still do get attended like that, but not here. So anyway, we're always having to explain stuff like that. But I wanted to mention those series just because we have, you know, they're kind of the ones we always fall back on because we love them so much. But I will say one thing about those series is that the chapters are extremely long. And I feel like when you're first starting out with chapter books, I actually think it can be a little bit discouraging, or I don't know what the right word is, but just to have such a long chapter because it's hard to break it up if you need to, but it's also hard for kids to sit for 30 or 40 minutes while you read the whole chapter. So I was going to mention a couple shorter books that we love. So this one is The Chocolate Touch.
Oh, I loved that one so much.
Yeah, this one made my kids laugh so hard, and you can see it's just a short book, and it has lots of has quite a few illustrations in it too. But that one was just fun, and they've loved Pippi Longstocking. Those ones have been fun, and you know, just pretty funny. They have loved every single book we've read by Roald Dahl. So I don't know if I just have kids that have really morbid senses of humor or what.
No, Roald Dahl's the best.
No, I love him too. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes I think, oh, they're not going to like this. And they totally love it. They have ate up everything that we've ever read by him. And some of his are shorter and have shorter chapters, like Fantastic Mr. Fox. Was a really great one for younger kids. So because it's a little bit shorter. So we love that. And another one I was going to mention that we read over the summer that we loved was called By the Great Horn Spoon. Kind of a weird title, but it's by Sid Flashman, and it was this super fun, super rollicking adventure story. And the chapters were short in that one as well. So that was a good one. And I was trying to think if there was another. Another one we read over the summer was called Owls in the Family. Owls like the animal, the bird. And that one was shorter also. So I think shorter books or even longer books, but with shorter chapters can be really effective at the beginning. And then it's kind of amazing, I feel like, what happens after you've read aloud for a while, that now I can give them these books, or I can read these books to them that do have really long chapters, do have really complex sentence structures or vocabulary, or just the language is a little bit older, and it's like it doesn't even faze them anymore. So
because the exposure over time has built up what they need to know. That's what's so great about reading.
So what books have you read so far that have been successful?
Right. So our first read aloud was a great success, which was wonderful. And our first I chose very carefully too, and it was Charlotte's Web, favorite classic of mine. And it went over so well that my son wanted to be bolder for Halloween. So we did a Charlotte's Web Halloween costume theme. It was really fun. So that one was great and wonderful and a lot of fun. We also did The Mouse and the Motorcycle. Talking Animals were a big hit for a long time there. It was fun. But on the note of books with shorter chapters, or shorter books too, that have been successful, is the Flat Stanley series. My son has really enjoyed the Flat Stanley series, and it's a weird series. And I think the first one, the first one was written, I think, without like any thought of it becoming a series. And then it was, I don't know if it was successful or whatever, and then the author decided to continue on with it through the years, because they don't always feel super connected. Some of them are connected, some of them don't feel connected at all. I don't know, but my son really likes just that style of writing and the short chapters and the formulaic story of Flat Stanley has been good too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, so far those have been our successes.
That's good. Yeah, and I mean, we've definitely had books, like I said, that we've had to put down, or books that have been a little bit more tedious that we have stuck out because we've enjoyed parts of them. So one that we read last summer was Rascal by Sterling North, which is a true story, and it's about his pet raccoon. And so there were enough funny parts that my kids really enjoyed it, but it was also kind of had some slow, tedious moments in it too. So I don't know. You have to gauge if it's worth it or not. But
all right. Those are some good ones. So we'll have links to all of these books in the show notes, right?
We will. And feel free to comment on some of the read alouds that have been a success for your family, because I'm very interested.
Yes, I'm always looking for recommendations, definitely.
Okay, so for our book recommendation segment this month, we thought it would be kind of fun to go back to our own childhoods and think about those books that that our parents read aloud to us that have kind of stayed with us. And so I think this will be fun. I'm really excited to hear what you chose, Suzanne. Were your parents big? Like, did both of your parents read aloud to you, or how did that play out in your family?
It was my mom. It was mostly my mom, because she was home with us during the day, and it was mostly when we were younger. But I just have very, very clear memories of sitting on the floor and listening to her read. It was a daily activity, and loved it, and still remember so many of I don't necessarily remember a lot of plot points sometimes, but I remember the titles, and I remember, had very clear memories of my mom getting all teared up and choking up, and like the sound of her voice tearing up from like the sound effects that we would read, or anyway, and just really fond memories of being read to as a kid. And so thinking back on some of my favorites, I said I have a very clear memory of my mom being unable to finish Where the Red Fern Grows. Like, she could not get through it, and I think my dad had to finish reading it to us. Like it was so she just could not.
That's really cute.
She was crying too hard. Anyway, I know. But the other book that I remember clearly enjoying with her is Summer of the Monkeys, which I didn't realize until going back and looking for this recommendation segment was written by the same person as Where the Red Fern Grows. I had no idea. Yeah. So they were written by the same person, which makes sense because they're both like super classic, boy stories or whatever. But anyway, so Summer of the Monkeys, I just remember being funny and hilarious, and the image of this tree in the middle of America being covered in monkeys was just an image that has never left me, and that was a fun story, and I loved it.
Been on my list, and I think I even had it checked out last summer to read it to my kids, and it didn't happen. So I think this summer's good.
Still time. So, it's a good one. It is a good one. All right, Amy. So what do you remember? From your childhood? I assume your parents obviously were big readers.
They were both readers, and of course I have lots of memories of my mom reading aloud. But then the book I'm actually sharing today is one that my dad read aloud, and so my dad. We lived in a very rural part of northeastern Colorado. And so anything we needed, we had to drive a long way to get to. So church was 45 minutes away. And so every Sunday, my mom would drive and my dad would read aloud to us for those 45 minutes.
Oh, what a fun tradition.
And yeah. So, I mean, that was a great way to use that time in the car, for family bonding. But so he read the entire Little Britches series by Ralph Moody. Are you familiar with those?
No, I'm not.
So the first one is called Little Britches. It's a true story. It's a memoir of this boy who his family moved from New England to Colorado, and like at the turn of the century, and they were ranchers. Well, they tried a bunch of different things, but his father ended up passing away while he was still quite young, and he had to take on a lot of the responsibilities, kind of the man of the house, on himself. But anyway, this series was 8 books long, and I mean, it is such a big part of my childhood because, I mean, my dad was pretty much only reading on Sundays in the car. And so it took us years
to read
all 8 books. And so that is just such a part of my childhood, sitting in the car listening to my dad.
Fun.
And he did such great voices. Like with anything he read, he would vary the voices. And we knew he was talking before he even said who it was, because he would make them so distinguished.
That is the best.
Yeah. So good memories. But that's a series that I've meant to return to now as an adult, because there are so many things I don't remember about it. But like you said, I remember the feeling, and I remember just like kind of the fun family bonding time. So
yeah, which is what reading aloud is all about.
Yep, exactly.
So anyway, yeah, this has been such a fun episode, such good stuff to talk about, and I'm excited for all the links to all these books for future reference, having them in one place. All right.
Yep.
And we want to thank all of you guys for watching this month. And just a reminder that we will be back next month with our special mini book club episode. And we will be discussing The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. And so there's bound to be spoilers. So if you want to join us, please read the book with us. That is next on my to-read list. So we'll announce the time and date for that in a few weeks.
That's next. I haven't started yet either, but I have it. I just got it from Audible, so I think this weekend I'm going to start it.
All right.
So I'm excited.
Okay, yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. Okay,
okay. We'll see you next month then.
We'll see ya.
All right. Bye.
Bye.